Most of us believe that every human is valuable. But what is it that makes each of us of value? Is it our soul, our consciousness, or our reasoning? This is a question that many people struggle with, and one that Immanuel Kant seeks to answer in his theory called Kantian deontology. I'm Toby Parmalee, and this is my article review. Now, I want to start by summarizing what exactly Kantian deontology is, and then also looking at the author's thesis of this theory. Then I want to look at a few weaknesses that there seem to be with this theory. Kantian deontology tends to focus on our reasoning to determine what is right and wrong by looking at morality using our rationality. Now, Kant believes that it is the actions we do and the intentions behind them that determine right and wrong, whereas the consequences of those actions we make is irrelevant. He believes that the duties that we do are the primary issue, and that there are certain actions we are obligated to do and things we are obligated not to do as well. Now, what duties do we have? How do we determine what is right and what is wrong? Kant derives all of our duties from one categorical imperative, and this is a principle that applies as the foundation of all duties that we are to perform. Kant splits this categorical imperative into three formulations. The first formulation is that all moral rules are universal laws, that they apply to everyone. If there is something that is right for me to do, then it should be right for everyone else as well. And there can't be any exceptions to the rule. That's not how the first formulation works. Now, the second formulation states that all humans are intrinsically valuable, that we are all in a way equal in value, and that no human being can be treated as a mere thing or be used as that. We all deserve dignity. The third formulation is this idea of a kingdom of ends, which is that when we follow all of our duties and rules, it will ultimately lead to this kingdom of ends, which he describes as this state where we all share the same laws and we treat each other equally as human beings to reach a common ends, something similar to a utopia. Now, Cranach's view of this theory is that it is rather appealing and that it has a sophisticated framework, and also that it is very useful to answering some difficult moral questions. Now, I want to evaluate this thesis because it doesn't seem very well established. In his conclusion, he presents this with very little issues to it, and yet throughout the rest of the article, he raises several problems with that he then seems to overlook in his conclusion. This makes his conclusion seem rather inconsistent with what he's been saying throughout the rest of the article. He maybe needed to establish a little better what he was saying at the end. Kant says that if you universalize a rule, that will determine if it is right or wrong. Now, it is not the consequences of universalizing. The consequences have no effect on the morality of the rule. However, if there is a contradiction that arises with the rule from universalizing it, that will determine if the rule is right or wrong. However, there seems to be a contradiction here, because if a contradiction arises with universalizing the rule, wouldn't that contradiction be a result or a consequence of universalizing? If universalizing leads to the contradiction, that itself seems to be a consequence, but Kant just said that consequences don't affect the morality, which would mean that even if a contradiction resulted, that contradiction would have no effect on whether the rule is right or wrong. This idea seems rather contradictory and weak. The second weakness with deontology is concerning Kant's view of rationality. In the third formulation, he says that autonomy is necessary for us to have morality. In other words, if we do not have self-rule, if we're not in charge of the decisions we made, then it could not be said that our actions are right or wrong. However, how could this be true if the categorical imperative, which is a universal imperative that applies to all actions and all duties, that seems to be imposed on us? And how can we have autonomy if this universal law is imposed on us? Now, Kant seems to answer this question by saying that the categorical imperative is the only rational rule, and that anybody who is rational would agree with it. But this raises more questions. Let's say that I disagree with the categorical imperative. Does that mean that I am irrational? And if I am irrational, what does that mean for me as a person? If we look at Kant's view of what a person is, he defines them in terms of our capacity for rationality. And also that any being not capable of rationality lacks dignity. This seems rather alarming if we consider other people like special needs or others who are mentally impaired. What if they do not have the rationality that Kant says is necessary to be human? Do they not count as human beings? Or how rational do they have to be? Where do we draw the line of how smart we need to be to just be human? If we don't meet Kant's standards for rationality, we might find that we lack all dignity and that we are nothing more than animals. We would also have no intrinsic value according to the second formulation. This idea is very alarming and seems untrue. Although deontology may be attractive for its appeal to reason, there are several issues that it has. First, its opinion that consequences have no effect on rules seems contradictory, particularly to its first formulation. And second, Kant seems to idolize rationality, and as a result, he wrongly identifies what it is that makes humans of value. Despite the appeal that it may have, deontology has too many problems to be considered a sound theory. Now, Kant's view of doing the right thing no matter the consequence is an intriguing idea, and despite the flaws this theory has, that basic idea should be considered by everyone, and they should compare that to their own moral beliefs.